Right, good morning and welcome to today's July 3rd Thursday marketing meeting presented to you by AgriSampo North America and our producer marketing information services team. We want to welcome you again and thank you for attending. We have three expert panelists to share what's going on with the market today and maybe kind of look at what your strategy should be, what kind of options you should look at. We have Brooks York, who is our Director of Producer Services. We have Sterling Smith, who is our Director of Ag Research. Yay! And we have Mike Toohill, who is our Corporate Technical Agronomist. We do want to encourage you that if you have any questions, that you put those into that chat box or into the Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer those as they come in. Just want to go through some screens with you here just really quickly, just so you see what we've got going on. We have, click. Well, just some introductions, but I do want to let you know at the end of today's meeting, we will share with you some more information regarding our upcoming third Thursday marketing meeting in August and our WASDE report that will be live on August 12th. So basically just 1 month from the July one. And actually next week, we have Sterling, who is going to be representing AgriSampo North America on a Bloomberg agricultural outlook for the July. And we will have those signups available in our DMO. Please make sure that you send those to those requests to see that to marketinginfo@sampointernational.com, and we will get that invite to you. So I will stop sharing my screen for now, and Brooks, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Perfect. Well, Christy, we've got some pretty good, important things to talk about today. And one of which is we'd like to kind of start off. We know we're in a volatile season right now. We know that every day makes a difference on yield. And we've got a lot of conflicting yield reports coming in from the country. We see where Iowa got really good coverage in the last 24 hours. Even the areas in northern Iowa, there was some big catch up there as far as moisture deficits go. Southern Corn Belt down here in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio has been almost perfect the last 14 days. But we've still got trouble pockets out there. We've also got some widespread pockets. And we've got Mike Toohill on here today. And Mike's really going to dissect, what the weather looks like. Now, a lot of times we look at weather and, it's more for an entertainment factor. We find out what's going on out there. But in fact, this year, as supplies are tight, we're talking about single bushel yield differences, even half bushel yield differences when it comes to soybeans having a big impact on the bottom line. So today's meeting, what we would like to do and the order in which we would like to do it, I'd really like to ask Sterling to step in. And when I say 1 bushel matters on the balance sheet, I would really like an illustration so that you guys can see this. This is something that Sterling and I see every day. We kind of regurgitate these numbers very quickly. Sometimes it's not that easy if these numbers aren't in front of you all the time. Sterling's going to walk us through what 1 bushel of corn does to the balance sheet, what 1 bushel of soybean does to the balance sheet. Mike is going to tell us, and I'm going to put him on the spot as usual, what are the likelihoods that we meet trend line yields this year, because they're really, really important. Why are they important? That's the last part of this meeting. They're important because it impacts the price that you get on the farm. And at the end of this meeting, we're going to talk about some specific strategies. There's not a perfect marketing strategy out there, but there's some strategies out there that you can be aggressive with, even if you are conservative in nature. Even if you don't like being oversold, there's a threat of oversold. There are some things that you can do right now. And when you think about putting price floors on things, we're going to talk about this more in a second, above $5 on corn and above $13 on beans, you can afford to be wrong this year. The market can continue to go up, and those prices might look low compared to where the market's at. We're going to show you it's okay to be wrong, and that you can actually follow that market up should we see those big rallies throughout August, maybe even that rare harvest rally. So with that, Sterling, I just mentioned 1 bushel can make a big difference on the balance sheet. Do you care to illustrate that for everybody that's watching today?
Sure, here, let me share my screen here and we can do this real quickly here. So, can everyone see? You should be able to see a spreadsheet. Is that what everyone's seeing?
Almost.
There, it's up now, Sterling.
There it is.
There you go.
There it is. All
All
right, so what we can do right here, right now the USDA is at 179.1. And the number we really worry about is this bottom number, the ending stocks number. This is how much we'll have left over. This is what the market really keys and drives price off. Now, if I just cut this from 179.5 to 178.5, watch what happens here. There, we're down to 15.52. The market, when it gets below 1.5 billion in the carryout, gets fairly sensitive. And that is the thing we need to be aware of. Now, I have a research company that I work with, and they'll be doing that webinar with me at Bloomberg. And they actually do crop yield estimates. And where they think their crop yield is, and I've been working with these guys for 10 years, and they do know what they're doing. Right now, their magic number is 175, which takes us right there to about.
Hey, Sterling, can you enlarge that? It's kind of small. I think people might want to see those numbers.
Can you see it better now?
There we go.
Yes, much
Yes.
better.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank
There
you.
we go. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Sterling,
you
I
can
want to
see,
take the time here just to jump in real quick. If you're watching these, and again, we talk balance sheets in a daily conversation in our world. You may not. What we're talking about here is the acres that were planted this past spring, and this would be the carryouts or the ending stocks at the end of the 21-22 crop year. So this would be projected about this time next year of what we would have left. So Sterling's done a really good job of illustrating, just a quick change down to from a 3 or 4 bushel the acre of a 1.5 billion carryout down to a 1.25 billion carryout. So Sterling, go right ahead. I just wanted to add some color in case
now,
they didn't have these in front of them every day.
now, where it gets real sensitive is when we do this with soybeans. Right now, we're at 50.8. Let's go ahead and take that down 1 bushel. And that takes us to 49.8, and that gives us ending stocks that becomes below 100 million. And at this point, price becomes your differentiator. We aren't going to go to zero, and we're not going to go below zero. So we get to that point, that's when the market is going to get very, very sensitive, and we're going to see prices move to a completely different realm. It's also something on your farm where, depending on where you're located, you may or may not have issues. If you're fortunate enough to have a really good crop, you're going to be in good shape. If you're, not so fortunate, then we're going to run into issues. Now, right now, the guys over at Planalytics have soybean yields at 50.1, which isn't too far off where the USDA is, but still puts us below that 100 million number. And I'm not going to steal Mike's thunder talking about the weather here, but I was out looking at crops here in eastern Nebraska yesterday. Things look really good. We had a bad storm last week, but not a lot of storm damage. We're in very good shape here so far, but that forecast is changing, and it's not changing in a favorable way for growing plants. We'll put it that way.
Sterling, going back to the corn, if you don't care to flip that on there, I get a lot of questions. And of course, we're all kind of programmed for what could go wrong because it's just the nature of what we do. We look at corn on here, and let's go down to that usage specifically. I'm going to tell you that we are plugged in with some really good export networks and some folks that, like Sterling says, they know what they're doing. This 2.5 billion, Sterling, they believe, and something you and I talked about, that the hogs are alive and well in China right now. They believe that these exports could be prolific, maybe even as high as 2.8 billion. Could you adjust that for me?
Okay, we're going to adjust that, and we're going to take that up to 2.8, and that's going to take us down to 956, operating with that 175 yield. So, right, if we want to take it back to where the USDA is right now, I can put that back to 179.5. That takes us to there. But again, I don't think that 2.8 billion number is unbelievable in any situation. I look at where the sales commitments are going forward for next year. China's there, and they're buying with both hands. There's absolutely no question.
It would appear that unless we have a round 2 of COVID, it looks like our domestic feed number is relatively safe at the 5.5 billion. I think most agree there, and it's probably the one that's going to change the least. Let's look at ethanol. Give us a rundown of ethanol. Now, this is the one that might spook me a little bit. We've seen some court decisions, and I know that that's mainly impacted soy diesel blends. Is there anything in ethanol that we could adjust this by 200, 300 million, in your opinion?
It could
Lower.
go 200 or 300 either way. It could go up a couple hundred. We see energy prices ease up a little bit. 2, we still have a lot of people in this country not driving to work every day. By September, that's going to change. When the rest of these benefits come off, they're going to be driving. That could push that number up, let's call it 53, 53 and a half. On the other side of the coin, we could see another outbreak of the Delta variant of COVID. The numbers right now are getting a little bit frightening in some places. If we see that, maybe we shave that down to 51. So there is some room for some variance in here, and some of that's going to depend entirely on outside factors. I do think if we do see things return back to normal, we see more people driving, maybe the risk is that this number gets a little bit bigger.
Very good. Very good. So there's a lot of variables in the balance sheet. We can't just adjust one, and today we're focusing on just adjusting one, and that's in yield. But you can see there's a lot of things at play here. But all in all, as a group, I think we remain pretty positive on long-term opportunities. Mike, we'll kind of transition over to you. I've been doing this virtual crop tour week on week, and if you've read it, you'll see whenever we started, I kind of thought, we're not going to get great information out of this. I actually have really enjoyed it. I've actually gotten some new perspectives on what's going on out there, especially in the areas that have been impacted, like the Dakotas and some parts of Minnesota. And it looks like to me we've got a lot of parts of the country that are quote, hanging on, unquote. They're kind of one rain to the next. And the forecast does not look terribly favorable, at least the long term did not today. When it comes to that 179.5 trend line, and I believe it was 50.8 trend line yield on soybeans, what are our odds? What are we facing? What's the likelihood that we're able to reach those numbers?
Yeah, very good discussion. I think when Christy gets my slides up, we'll kind of go through that in a little bit slower detail, Brooks, but I'll hit you with an answer we get toward the end of the presentation.
As long as you've got an answer, that's all we're looking for, Mike.
Yeah, I printed my core number this morning. We'll see where that goes. It did get better this week, though, so that is a good thing. Christy will get my slides, and we'll get rolling here. So here we go. Thanks, Christy. And like I say, I'll just have you advance the slides. This is me, kind of old and bald, but I've been doing this a long time. This is going to start answering Brooks' question. Been getting this a lot. Is the current U.S. corn yield closer to 180? And like Sterling said, right now the USDA is at 179.5, or could we get as low as 170? I think we're going to a very critical time here. Part of the Midwest is getting very good conditions. Right here in Bloomington, Illinois, we're flooded. We went from a great crop 2 weeks ago to a very average crop, and we've also got some dry weather advancing. So at this point, Chrissy, hit the next slide, please. There we go. This map is a little bit old. NOAA's having a little bit of data issues, so we're a couple days out. And like Brooks said, this shows our normal percent of precipitation. And we did get some nice rains coming through parts of Iowa. So the oranges, reds, yellows, those are areas that are very low as far as percent of moisture in the last 30 days, running anywhere from 5 to 50 to 75%. So again, we still got very significant moisture problems throughout much of Minnesota. The Dakotas are at their moment of time this week. A lot of the corn that's been hanging on, will not be able to hang on much longer if Sterling's forecast is correct. We've also got some dry weather in Nebraska. Thank goodness, a lot of irrigation there. And a new dry area to watch is Kansas. Pretty important corn and soybean state, and parts of Kansas, especially central and west, are getting very dry. But another thing we need to look at that map. Look at all those blues and purples. Those areas are running anywhere from 150 to 200% of normal rainfall. And normally rain does make grain in July, but even on well-tiled grain like we have here in central Illinois, there's nowhere for the water to go, and our crop has went backwards. So again, looking at the moisture maps, I see the big areas that are too dry, and I also see big areas that are too wet. So it kind of works against trying to get closer to the 179.5 in my opinion. Next slide, Christy, please. This is the current corn conditions map. And again, this map shows where things are at. And these are the kind of the states I'm watching. I'm really watching the Dakotas and Minnesota. South Dakota did have an increase in corn conditions by 7% last week, but they're only 31% good to excellent. The poor growers up in North Dakota are only 33% good to excellent. And a very important corn state, Minnesota, is just 42% good to excellent. But one thing we do need to talk about, and Brooks alluded to this, Iowa's getting better with every rain. And they got more rain, good coverage yesterday. They don't have the flooding rains we've had here in Illinois. And an interesting thing to me last week, Iowa jumped Illinois in crop conditions. Illinois is down to 60% good to excellent. We lost 5 points last week, and we've been getting plenty of rain. So again, rain doesn't always make grain. This morning, we've got flash flooding coming through a very nice area of northern Peoria County, Stark County, Marshall County. I just drove those areas last week, and I'm afraid right now, looking at some of the video coming, we've got water across the roads. We're losing creek bottoms in the low ground. So again, the main states I'm watching on corn, the Dakotas, Minnesota. Watching Iowa. Iowa's getting bigger. If you guys are 180 bushel guy, look at Iowa. But Illinois is going backwards with every rain. Next slide, Christy. Thank you. What about soybeans? Again, the soybean conditions nationally were only 59% good to excellent, unchanged last week. To me, those conditions are pretty mediocre considering all the early planted beans this year. Normally, you plant 30, 40% of the Midwest early in April. You're going to have some really nice beans by this time of year, but we just never got the good conditions for early beans this year. Once again, I'm watching the Dakotas. Look at the ratings for North Dakota, 21% good to excellent. South Dakota, 28%. And look at that rating for Minnesota, 45%. And one thing we also want to look at, let's go down to Missouri. I know it's not a huge state, but they do grow a lot of beans there, especially their double crop beans. And a lot of the pictures I've seen, they've rotted the double crop beans. And look at Illinois, we lost 7 points last week. And also look at Kansas, lost 8%. So again, not going to give you a B number today, but my thoughts on soybeans based on today's conditions in the forecast, that 50.8 is going to be a little tough to achieve. Go ahead, Christy, next slide, please. And Sterling Brooks, feel free to interject anytime you want to inject here, guys. I know I talk a little bit fast. This is this morning's drought.
One thing, Mike, I'll point out, and it was on that previous map, but there doesn't appear to be, outside of the Dakotas where we've got those low ratings and the good to excellent, that it doesn't seem to be much of a pattern. And having driven through some of this area in the last week, I can tell you, I mean, my pick, I like the Indiana and the Ohio crop. They look just phenomenal. I've driven through Indiana, and I know, Christy, you took a trek through Ohio in the last week, and these crops look really, really good. Illinois, you can change your mind every 2 miles driving down the road, and that's what's kind of bizarre. We have no consistency in Illinois. We've got corn that is 300 plus bushels on one part of the field that was well drained. The areas that are not drained will be less than 100. So it's really, really challenging to rate the Illinois crop. The beans down here, it's one thing we kind of want to dance around a little bit, but the appearance of the beans and I'll just speak for myself, at least in my area, look as if there's herbicide damage, and I say widespread. Will it affect yields? I think it's way too early to tell. Historically, we haven't experienced anything like this, but literally 50 to 60% of the fields, beans are cupped or puckered, if you want to call them that. So it's going to be interesting to see what the impact is, if there is any impact. But Illinois is just, it's a highly variable mess right now, is the best way to say it. But I agree with you, Mike. I think our overall condition probably got better, at least in the southern part of the belt with those rains last week. I know you guys don't need them up in central and northern Illinois, but just some food for thought that we've got highly erratic yields even in the same areas this year.
Yeah, I haven't been out to Indiana, Ohio, Brooks, but I'm kind of worried about the forecast. They're talking another 2, 3, 4 inches of rain for Indiana, Ohio this week, which could be kind of, let's say McLean County was a garden spot 2 weeks ago, and now we've got potholes everywhere. It's just amazing how fast conditions change. Again, going back to look at the drought monitor a little bit, it kind of goes back to what Brooks is talking about. Kind of watch those Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa is improving. And again, kind of watch that building drought, especially in parts of Kansas. Pretty important corn and soybean state. Rest of the Eastern Belt looks pretty good for moisture, but the drought monitor does not take into account too much rain. Next slide, Christy, please. The computer locked up, Christy. So, I'm sorry, next slide.
Is it not showing? It's showing on mine.
Yeah, I'm not showing it, Chris. I've still got the drought monitor on mine. There we go. Thank you, Christy. Perfect. I want to look at the class change week. I look at this every week when the drought monitor comes out on Thursday morning. On this map, the yellows got drier last week and the greens improved. So as I look at the map, let's start with the improvements. Like Sterling talked about, parts of Nebraska improved, especially the dry parts in the northeast part of the state. Some real good improvements in southwest Iowa. Also some nice improvements in parts of Michigan and Wisconsin. Look at South Dakota, pretty important corn state. We had some improvements in the green, but we also had some problems in the yellow, but most of those hopefully are further west and more of the grassland. North Dakota really didn't change much, but looking at Minnesota, lots of net changes. I know most of the southern part of the state where most of the big corn bushels come from stayed the same, but we also got some pretty significant drought issues in parts of northern and central Minnesota. And again, kind of look at that building drought in parts of Kansas. I think this week's rain is going to kind of miss those dry areas. So again, Kansas crop ratings dropped last week, primarily due to drier weather. Next slide, please, Christy. Now we're going to talk about why it's so important. On most farmer social media, we talk about the corn holding on and holding on and holding on, and that is true. But the vast majority of Midwest and Northern Belt and Western Belt crops are pollinating now. This shows seasonal water use in inches. And as you know, we can have a lot of dry weather early, but once you get to the silking stage where we're at on most of this corn, or maybe a little bit before silk or a little after silk, corn is using over 1.5 inches, closer to 1.8. So again, once we start getting that heat that Sterling alluded to coming through the northern and western belts, those areas that are running on fumes as far as soil moisture, they're not going to be talking about the corn holding on much longer. It's going to have its moment of time, and that moment of time, unfortunately, is going to be coming up here in the next 7 to 10 days. Yeah, Sterling shaking his head. We all know that this corn that's holding on, it's going to have its moment of truth here really soon.
Yeah, that's where I'm really concerned about things in Iowa. We have seen improvement, yes. But the forecast, well, here for Omaha is the last day of rain is today, and then we go into the furnace until the end of the month. We saw some improvements in southeast Iowa. That's not the big area I'm worried about. It's that area north of Interstate 80. And let's go 75 miles either side of Interstate 35. That's where, that's where they really need to punch above their weight class to get that yield up there. And that is the area I'm most concerned about.
Agreed, Sterling, agreed. This is a picture that came out of North Dakota a couple of days ago. That corn is tasseling and missed the rain. We've got 90s coming. That's going to be chopped or destroyed here really rapidly. So again, the corn has mean its moment of truth. Brooks and I were running around Illinois in 2012. Anything in southern Illinois on light soil by the middle part of July was at this stage. So again, you're not going to bring that corn back based on the forecast. So again, how many acres are out there like this? We don't know at this point, but a lot of those fields that have been on the moment of truth are gone. Go ahead, Chris, hit the next slide. And this really shows it. We talked earlier about the corn holding on, holding on, holding on. This is corn yield reduction due to water deficit with 4 days of stress. And as you see, not a lot of yield loss going up to B9, B10, 11, 12. But once you hit tassel time, we're roughly losing 1 to 1.5% of yield loss per day of stress, and we're at the maximum time when you couldn't have a poorer timed hot dry period coming up with corn at tassel or early grain fill. And oftentimes the corn under stress will pollinate, those ears will abort back in 3 to 4 days without water. So again, we're at a very critical time. It'll be interesting to see what happens a week from now as far as crop conditions and some of the reports from social media where the guys thought their corn had a chance and it's out of water. Next slide, please, Christy. We're going to talk about rain and grain making grain until they don't. This is that same map I showed earlier. Again, what we really want to be concerned about are some of the blues and purples coming through most of Missouri. A big chunk of Illinois got wrecked last week. I'm not sure about Michigan. Hopefully that water got off Michigan, but I would assume Michigan's got some issues. And we want to watch that Indiana map pretty closely. You add another 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in Indiana, a lot of clay soils in Indiana, nowhere for that water to go. I think the Indiana crop conditions are probably primed for a decrease if we get the type of rain. So again, rain and storms make grain until they don't. Next slide, please, Christy. Maybe we can let Sterling talk about this. There was some isolated wind and hail, but those are more local issues. Most of those were in parts of Nebraska and Iowa. Sterling, do you have some comments about how widespread you think that was?
I was actually out driving around in Dodge County and western Douglas County yesterday. Crops look very good. I did not see any signs of any damages. Things are silking right now. I found both some dry land and some irrigated fields, and things look very, very good for both corn and soybeans. There was plenty of tree damage. We had about 95-mile-an-hour straight-line winds Friday night to set off all the tornado sirens here in the city. There was a couple of reports out in central Nebraska. There was a little bit of corn that got knocked down. I don't think it's anything that's going to move the needle. Mostly, I think it made good news coverages. Some poor guy's grain bin got overturned and blown down the street. But that was really, the rain was probably more beneficial, and we need it. But again, what's going to happen with Iowa next week and the week after is really the big question, because most of this stuff here has irrigation available to it.
Yeah, here in Illinois, we've had some isolated storm damage, but again, not a big factor. This took away a lot more bushels. The picture I have on the left side of the screen, it's a little hard to see, but I made this picture small, but that was corn that was tasseled. That field's probably got an APH of 220. That's not anywhere near a creek or river or a drainage ditch. And looking at that field, I'm guessing there's 10 acres that's completely gone. And Brooks or Sterling, what's going to happen with that 10 acres in McLean County, and it's going to get 3 more rain? What's that going to look like 2 weeks from now? That's going to be a zero, nothing but a water impact. Yeah.
Kind of what, I was alluding to, Mike. Around here, we've got pockets of wonderful corn, and it might be in a 40-acre field where you've got pockets that are going to go 300 plus on the combine monitor, and they're going to dip pretty doggone quick when you get into that hole. And it doesn't take many zeros in that field, everybody knows, for that overall yield to go down considerably.
Yeah, I was shocked. I've been running around McLean County for 55 years, and this devastation I saw heading to Champaign County for a run on Saturday was it was hard to believe how much devastation. Again, those are going to be nothing but water hem patches. We may try to throw a few soybeans in a few fields, but not much going to happen there. And also looking at above, that's a field of soybeans. I'm going to try to go back to the next slide, last slide, Christy. I want to talk about that a little more. There are just a lot of acres of soybeans too that are underwater that you can't see from the road. And I wonder if a guy did some aerial photography in some of the vegetative maps that'll be coming in through Illinois. You're going to be seeing a lot of variation too. So again, these pictures from the #1 corn producing county in the nation, McLean County. There is some great corn in McLean County, like Brooks alluded to. The northern part of the county looks pretty good, but again, we're out of time to replant, and those are be nothing but wheat nurseries for the summer. So again, we went from a garden spot to pretty mediocre crop after about 10 inches of rain. Next slide, Christy.
Brooks, next year for the virtual crop tour, I think you need to get me a drone.
That would be fun.
Fly that thing out and
we definitely need
get some pictures.
I'll put that on order right after the private jet.
I don't need the private jet, but the drone might be able to get some pretty entertaining footage out of that.
You're right. We're finding more and more practical ways to use a drone. I know whenever they first came out, it was largely kind of entertainment, kind of a wow factor. And the things that they're doing with these drones now are pretty amazing. Whenever they can take stand counts on corn, I start to become a believer.
Exactly true. We've got a lot of other issues you can't even see with a drone, guys. Maybe you could pick it up from a satellite map. but we're getting more and more yellow corn, especially here in Illinois from too much rain. I'm sure that's a problem also in Missouri where they've had too much water. We've got a lot of disease coming in the corn too, primarily gray leaf spot. And the picture on the right shows anthracnose. That's kind of rotting off those secondary ear shoots. What we're seeing, a lot of farmers this year are going to spend money on fungicide. So if you're thinking 180, yeah, we're going to spend a little more money on this corn crop, but we're having a hard time getting the planes in the air because of all the rain, and they're not going to be able to run much until next week. So it may be a little bit behind optimum. So lots of disease in the corn. Most growers will not address the nitrogen situation. Some guys may try to wide drop a little more in down, but generally when the corn gets that tall, they've already spent $30 for a fungicide, probably not going to add much more additional in. And these are things you can't see from the road. So again, Sterling talks about the importance of Iowa, and I think I need to talk a little bit more about the importance of Illinois. I think a lot of our 170, 180 is going to depend on what happens in those two states. Next
Hey,
slide.
Mike, let me ask you a quick question. So you mentioned you were having a tough time finding that window for fungicide application. We're definitely seeing that down here. And what happens is we might miss that optimal time on each field. In other words, we might be a little early, we might be a little late. Ideally, tell us the stage that we need to be in. How many days do we have that window to apply? Because I think there are some people a little further north this year considering fungicide with the yield potential and the price that's out there. Give us some advice on that.
Kind of generally, when I go into a high yielding cornfield, my first thought on fungicide is if I've got a really nice looking field of corn, I'm not worried about corn price. I want to protect those bushels, but $5 plus corn, it makes it even more important to protect those bushels. So number one, nice looking field of corn, nice corn price, got mud on my shoes, good conditions for disease. I want to be spraying. And ideally, if I'm going to walk into a cornfield, Brooks and Sterling, I want that field completely tasseled, and I want to go about 7 days after completely tasseled. I think that's the ideal timing. The silks are starting to get a little bit brown. You may lose a little bit on early season disease control, but it does help to extend on the late season disease control, give you a little better stalk quality come fall. So ideally, I want to be somewhere out there 7 days after full tassel. But like you say, with using an airplane, you need to get on the list because you're going to lose a lot of that control, and they're going to do the best job they can. And another problem, too, as far as ground rigs, the corn's not real tall this year, Brooks, but we had a lot of corn that blew down a little bit. There's some elbowing in it, and the ground rigs are tearing up a lot of corn just because of the down corn. So most of it's going to have to be done with an aerial application. And those guys are backed up pretty significantly. We also, with the early planted beans, it's time to spray the beans, too. So the aerial applicator guys, they're going to be really busy here. As far as 7 day expected rains, this kind of goes back to what Sterling was talking about. Looking at that map, parts of northern Iowa and northwest Iowa did miss the rains. There's no rain coming for 7 days. Minnesota, well, you have to look hard to even find a 1/10 of an inch there. Most of North Dakota is not going to get significant rain. South Dakota, to me, that looks like a very hard map to hit 180 just based on my knowledge. Maybe if Brooks or Sterling want to allude about that. Very important next 7 days coming up. And on the flip side, we've got that heavy rain coming through parts of Kansas into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. This is a 6 to 10 day forecast. Yeah, go ahead and you can advance, Chrissy. This one looks very concerning to me. 6 to 10 day temperatures on the left, lots of reds there, very warm, and also pretty dry throughout most of the major corn and soybean growing areas. But on the flip side, if you're thinking we're going to hit closer to 180, those cooler temperatures in the south are actually good for corn yields, cool nights. So again, probably looks good for the southern belt. Looks pretty rough for the northern belt. And unfortunately, we grow a lot more bushels of corn where the maps are red versus where the maps are blue. So that's our 6 to 10 day forecast, basically hot, dry for most of the major acres. And looking at the 8 to 14 day, more of the same, maybe a little more dry weather working its way south. So those maps aren't conducive to early grain fill. We always talk about the importance of pollination, and pollination is important, but with today's hybrids, they'll pollinate in almost every condition. But what happens if they don't get water and they get heat, those ears are bored back and you basically have nothing a week later. So again, a very critical time if you're hot and dry this week and you have no subsoil moisture. Next slide, please, Christy. Anybody's thoughts for the national corn yields today? If you want to throw a number out there, are you guys closer to 180 or 170? Me personally, I'm around 173 this morning. I did raise my by a couple bushels this week, primarily due to Iowa rains, but I'm probably a pretty burdensome number in the balance. I think that 173 is going to look pretty tough. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully we are closer to 180. Right. No one wants to throw a number out there. We'll hit the next slide. We'll talk about beans in a little more detail. Let's talk soybeans. There are some nice looking beans around Brooks. This is a field that's not cut, one of the few around Central Illinois anyway, that doesn't have a dicamba gene. Next slide, please. It's too early for me to put out a bean number. Again, like Sterling's talked about, the USDA is at 50.8, but I have numerous concerns about the bean crop. Despite early planting in much of the bean belt, growth has been very slow. We don't have a nose I'd like to see for early planted beans. Leaf cupping is very widespread in non-dicamba traded beans. I'll go back to answer one of Brooks's question earlier. Whenever you get that cupping, we're not going to talk about why we have the cupping. There's lots of different theories. I think we know what the main theory is, but we'll stay out of that today. Generally, when those beans cup, you get good late season rains, there's not much of a yield problem. But if the forecast is right, if we turn hot and dry, leaf cupping sometimes does lead to significant yields if we don't get the flowering rains to kind of get them out of the cupping stage and to get them back into better production. We've also got lots of disease issues in the bean fields. We've got lots of yellowing beans, a lot of septoria, brown spot. And again, flooding is taking its share in acres. And normally in Central Illinois, if you get some rain, it's early. We can replant those spots in May, maybe June. This year, with it being mid-July already, all those flooded acres are going to be zeros come harvest time. Weeds are also having a very good year. In some areas, it's been too wet for the residuals. Other areas, too dry. I'm really concerned about that dry pattern as we close out July in much of the north and the western belt. Got one last slide if we want to hit it, Chrissy, and we'll turn it back over to Brooks and Sterling. One thing we need to think about soybean window. Normally you talk about yield being built in August for beans, and that was true when we planted beans in my dad's day, when we planted beans maybe May 10th to maybe the Indy 500 day, Memorial Day. But whenever you move those planting dates up on soybeans to early to mid-April, the more important day moves up for soybeans. So instead of thinking August for beans with a big, vast majority of the Midwest planted in April this year, we moved to move those most important days up to July 20th to August 20th, in my opinion. So again, we're getting into the critical stage for the early planted soybeans also. So I think that hot, dry forecast for the Dakotas, Minnesota, and areas with no subsoil moisture, that's going to start leaving a mark on the bean yield also as early as next week. So we need some rain as soon as possible for the early planted beans in the dry areas. And on the flip side, it needs to dry out soon in areas that keep getting pounded by heavy rain. Here at Bloomington, we're expecting 1 to 3 more inches of rain. That's going to keep our soybean fields a swamp till the middle of next week. And then if we flip hot and dry, that's not real conducive to high bean yields either. So again, that's kind of where we sit here today. If I had to throw a number for soybeans, I would probably be somewhere around 49 today. And hopefully that's numbers also on the low side.
Well, Mike, thanks for the update. You know, we painted a picture, and we like to concentrate on problem areas, but we know in reality, there's a whole lot more optimal and even above average areas out there in parts of the country. You know, we look at these, and there's certainly problem spots where it's widespread, but like we talked about, there's a lot of farmers that are going to experience good yields even in these areas that have been affected. Each day I get a lot of questions from farmers. I spent the last 3 years, you know, doing farmer meetings across the country, and I give out my cell phone number, and a lot of times this time of the year my phone starts to ring. And over the last couple of days, and it's really funny, from Pennsylvania to Nebraska, the questions are very, very similar. And you know, I know that Christy's got some questions that have come in, and they're all reflective of everybody's concern out there. And they range from things like, you know, I've got the bushels, what do I need to be doing, to, I sold 30%. You saw that field of pollinating corn in North Dakota. I'm worried about even making those contracts. You know, I'm worried about filling those contracts with the yields we've got. Christy, what are some of the questions that you've gathered today?
Thank you. Yes. So far we have that have come in. The first one is, I've done nothing on soybeans. They look pretty good. Should I be
So you know, I think a lot of people are in this boat. Soybeans, there was a flurry of forward sales around $10 to $11, and there's nothing wrong with those. Sterling, most years we would wish for $10 or $11 out there, but looking at the situation right now, and again, can you afford to be wrong? I flip over and I start to look at prices, and I see November this morning trading at 13.80 3/4. You know, first off, we have to remember, is it okay to sell $13.80 beans if you think you've got a crop out there? Absolutely. I think on most balance sheets across the country, 13.80 beans work very, very well if we're experiencing pretty good yields out there. And even with when we use our crop insurance guarantees right now, you know, you can fall back on those. And a lot of those guarantees are in the 30s and the 40s across the country, depending on what coverage levels you've got. Something you can talk to your agent about. But Sterling, let's just say you're conservative, okay? And you just heard us, and you have to think we're somewhat bullish after what Mike told us, after what you've looked at on the balance sheet. And you don't want to miss that once-in-a-lifetime chance of selling beans at a monumental price, but at the same time, you know 13.80 sounds good. What do you got up your sleeve for marketing, Sterling? What could I do if I was that guy that didn't have many beans sold?
If you're a conservative guy, you need to be looking at protecting your farm income. If you're a speculative guy, you're the guy who doesn't cover things and you think prices are going to go up. What I would be looking at here is looking at doing some sort of min-max where we sell call up above the market a little bit, and then we use that to finance buying the put. So that way you keep some of your upside. You don't have to spend a lot of money out of your pocket to get something in place for this. And this is something, again, if you're the conservative guy actually and looking to protect your well-being, this is where you need to do something. We're looking, you know, as Brooks said, you know, if we get $10 and $11, we're happy. We're trading $2 better than that. Guess what? If it goes higher, leave yourself some room. You don't have to do everything at once. And another thing that I'm just slowly starting to creep into my mind here, starting to look at November 22 and December 22 corn. Because if we think back to 2012, remember, prices went up, and then those good opportunities to actually hedge that stuff were tied to what was going on in the current year. I'm not saying we're ready to do it. I'm just saying, you know, make a note that we need to start a little bit of paying attention to that. I think we may have an extended period here of bullish prices simply because of the way the feed structure is changing. However, we can't be guaranteed that we're going to have another bad situation in South America next year. If they have a bumper crop, that's going to put a different tint on this. And we need to think about this for marketing this year as well. That crop in South America goes in. We don't have a drought in Brazil, which is normally a wet place. Some of this magic that we have right now will evaporate. So I would definitely, depending on where you are and what your financial situation is, if you want to talk to me about it, feel free to give me a call. I'll sit down. We'll go over the math nickel by nickel. So
I'm gonna throw some strategies out there right now, Sterling. A $13.80 put is trading for around 74.5 cents. That's November futures. That gives you coverage through almost the end of October. And Sterling, explain what a $13.80 put for 74 cents. That's a lot of money. Explain what peace of mind a farmer could get if they employed that strategy alone.
Okay, so you spend 74 cents to buy this put. You are guaranteed the ability to sell your corn or your soybeans, at $13.80. So if we take $13.80 and we subtract 74 cents from that, that gives you $13.06 on the board. That's what your price is. If the price goes up, the option expires worthless, guess what? You still have all of your upside in place. No fuss, no muss. If the price goes down, you're covered. And if the price, let's say something happens, it's, new trade issues with China, and prices for whatever reason happen to plunge, you are covered. So that is a very conservative position, and we can manipulate the strike price around if you don't want to pay quite so much, depending on what your temperament is.
And so that would be compared to just stepping in and selling that 1381 type number on the board where you have no downside, you also have no upside. So it's a balance. Sterling mentioned a min-max.
Whoa. If you just go out and sell futures here and you just sell them at 1380, it's game over. You sold it. Prices go up, you're going to have margin issues. With the option, you know what your risk is going in. If stuff goes to $15, hallelujah. You are going to be happy as can be. If you sell those futures and it goes to $15, you're going to be writing margin call checks.
You can, and I guess I was coming more from the standpoint of selling that as a cash contract, Sterling, to the elevator. and locking in that price. So yeah, two different looks there. Sterling talking about more from a brokerage aspect of selling futures. I was kind of coming from it from a cash sale to the elevator. A min-max Sterling, let's say we like the 1380. We mentioned it's kind of pricey. That put is 74 cents. If you married it up with a 1540 for, let's just say 30 cents for easy math, your min-max is 1380 and 1540, kind of. You have to do some math. Where would that put someone at, Sterling?
Well, you'd have about 40 cents debit in the trade, so you'd pay 40 cents. So that would give you a floor. If you do it, call it 1380. You'll have a floor at 1340. 1540. You'll have a ceiling at $15, which again gives you $1.25 a bushel of upside. And again, it gives you very, very good protection from where we are right now. If prices start descending now, you're going to love this trade.
Christy, what other things have come across since we started? Any other questions?
Yes, you've got a couple more here. The next one is, I sold December corn futures at 476 and bought a 520 December call with option. What should I be doing with the calls?
So that's what's tricky, and this is where most farmers fall short. It's one thing to kind of make that initial hedge. That's a big hump to get over, but we find ourselves having to manage those hedges when we got options in there, and that's what's really tricky. It comes at a volatile and emotional time of the year where we need to do something. There's dozens of things that you can do, but I kind of boil it down to two practical things that we can do. The first thing is it's a good play, and that 520 call has gone up in value, and I'll check that out for folks right now and see where that's at. The 520 call looks as if it's worth around 61 cents today. So chances are that was bought at a lower premium, and you're in the money at this point in time, and you can do one or two things. And primarily, you can pick when a good time to exit that is and lock in your price, meaning sell the call option. You've got your short futures, you add that premium to your short futures, and you lock in a price. And it's kind of like selling those to the elevator. You've locked in a price. If the market goes down, you're protected. If the market goes up, you don't get to participate. You kind of sealed your destiny. The other thing is, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you see you've got those bushels in the field, you can afford to be wrong north of $5. The other thing you could do is, if you believe that the national average can be 172, 173, and it can be still, you believe there's upside, you can roll that call up. Sterling, I'll pass the ball to you on this one. If you were rolling this call up, first of all, tell everybody what I mean by that, and then number two, pick your strategy you'd like to see out there. Okay,
so if you have a 560 call right now, that call is at the money, and it's called.
I think it was 520.
Okay, it's 520 call. In that case, I would definitely look to remove it and swap it out for something else. What we're going to do is we're going to sell that call, and then we're going to buy something else to replace it. The reason we want to do this, you have money built into that option. That money is being made, and going forward, that option will move in line with futures contract. If it goes down, you are going to lose that money. If it goes up, you're going to make money, but you're going to make money at a slower rate than if we swap this option out. So what I would do is I would sell that call, and you could step in and you could buy a 560 call, which is at the money. You will get some money put back into your brokerage account, and you will actually have cheaper coverage than you do right now. This is a way of guaranteeing that you keep some of that money if prices fall apart and you have less money on the table. Anytime an option goes deep in the money, or in the money, that money is now sitting on the table, and my friends in Chicago will come and try and take it. So that's something where you definitely need to adjust a position anytime it falls this far into the money.
And in the event that you've got this strategy on with an elevator or a processor out there, the same rules apply. Get a hold of your merchandiser and they can execute for you, just like Sterling mentioned. Anything else come through, Christy?
Yes, I have one more. And I'm hoping I'm reading this right. It says my crop looks bad. I have sales on. I'm worried about filling the contracts. What should I do? They're not saying whether it's corn or soybeans. So there you go.
Just that things are not good and they're worried about being able to fill a contract. This is a tricky one, and it's one that we learned a tremendous amount about in 2012. And there's more way, as always, there's more than one way to skin a cat on this, but I'm gonna talk to you about one thing that's most important. Number one, realize that if you've got a contract with an elevator and you call in and you tell that merchandiser, I don't think I can fill the contract, legally, that merchandiser, that grain company's got 24 hours to cancel that contract out. You've already said you can't fill the contract. That's the way the trade rules work. Everybody needs to understand that. So, number one, even with the picture that Mike showed that was horrific, your yield is still unknown. Let's keep that in mind. It's still unknown. We need to remember that our crop insurance, if you've got harvest protection, grants you the average of, Christy, was that corn or soybeans? Was it corn, or did they say?
They did not say. I'm sorry. I can ask.
Oh, okay. We'll assume that it's corn, and crop insurance will protect you. It's going to provide you with the average price of December futures for the month of October. That's something to remember. And during that time period, that's how your indemnity is figured. So it's very important that we coincide canceling with the elevator as close to that average as we possibly can. I may have some audio problems here. I apologize, but essentially, you do not necessarily want to call the elevator and cancel prematurely. What happened in 2012 is that first week of August, a lot of contracts were canceled above $8. In that year, the October average came in at $7.51. So we hurt ourselves by canceling a little bit early. Now, from a marketing standpoint, Sterling, you may have something up your sleeve. Is it too late to jump in and buy calls? What are the upside and the downside of protecting with calls at this point in time?
If you need to buy calls, I think we're kind of in a good spot. If you looked at what I wrote in the Tech Tuesday stuff, the market has moved up since then, but we do have very bullish looks, particularly for corn, soybeans, and cotton. We have an unsatisfied gap where we could see easily another 35 cents in the corn without having any problems. The soybean situation, again, we're coming to where we're going to have the fundamental knowledge about where this crop's going to be very, very soon. Literally within the next 3 weeks. So if you're going to act on this, I would act sooner rather than later in terms of getting, some calls purchased. And if you want to, if you've got your crop priced really well and things are looking really good, you're thinking about buying a new pickup truck, well, maybe here's your spot where if you want to put a little lottery ticket in, I'm not really against that right here. The way the funds are positioned, particularly in soybeans and cotton, there's plenty of room for them to come in here and buy it. We do have the potential for a story to develop, and the Chinese demand side of things actually looks very, very positive. And the total global macro risk on temperament right now, interest rates have come back noticeably, and we're hovering, closer to 1.3, 130 on the 10s. So again, if you need to do any financing, I think now is a good time. But I do think there is the ability that we could see pretty good risk on behavior, probably for the second half of the year.
Very good. And I agree. And really, there is nothing wrong if you don't want to buy those call options. That is more money invested in this thing. Let the insurance work for you. That's something that we're here for you. Get a hold of your agent. Your agent has our number. We would be happy to explore the options and how that works. And I know it's uncharted waters for a lot of folks. it won't happen in very many cases, contract cancellations. But if you're in that spot, let us walk you through the pros and cons on that. Christy, any other questions come through?
Anytime to us, to our email address, which is marketinginfo@sampointernational.com. We'll be happy to answer for you, or definitely reach out to your agent, and they do know how to get in touch with us. But we do want to answer them. If you have any concerns, we'll be happy to help you. So, seeing no more questions, I want to go ahead and share what's coming up. We do have our next WASDE report, which will be Thursday, August 12th. That is a live look at the report as it is released, and then we watch with you how the markets react to that. You know, definitely in your producers and watch that video with them, watch that webinar. It's a really good one. And then we have our third Thursday marketing meeting, just like today, but it will be next month, August 19th. And again, it's just a report. We meet, discuss, talk what's going on with the market, and then Brooks and Sterling are able to answer these, and Mike as well, to help you with your operation and what you might want to look at regarding your options and your strategies. And then I do want to make sure that I mention Sterling is going to be in Bloomberg this month, and that will be June 14th.
No, that'll actually be on July 20th.
Oh, yeah.
June 14th is already passed.
Oh my goodness.
That'll be available for viewing on Monday, July 20th. And I will be doing this with the Planalytics weather guys. So we will have, you know, what their looking forward weather outlook is for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And we'll have a recording available for this that we'll make available for everybody, because what Jeff will be talking about will be important. Also, one thing I'd like to point out on the next WASDE 360 meeting, the USDA has changed corn yields on every single August WASDE going back the last 12 years, with the exception of 1 year. So the last WASDE report was kind of a nothing sandwich. This one I can guarantee, I'm going to guarantee this, we'll see some volatility because they are going to change yields.
Thank you so much. Mainly for that, the big plug for our WASDE, but letting me know that the date is wrong. So I really appreciate that. We will get that squared away. I'll make sure that that's fixed for you. For those questions, we want to be there to help you and support you with your operations. So, Brooke, Sterling, my parting comments, last words of advice and wisdom you'd like to share? Oh, I think we've,
Christy, I think we've covered a lot today. Covered a lot today. So I think that Mike gave us a really good rundown on the different conditions in the country. Sterling really showed us what the difference in a bushel, a half a bushel means to the balance sheet. Not only that, but prices. And then I really enjoy tackling those individual questions that we get on a daily basis from farmers. I think that's a practical approach. So we, again, if you've got any questions you need specifically for your farm, don't hesitate to reach out to us like Christy mentioned. But with that, Christy, I'll let you take us away. Everybody have a safe and productive week.